Velkaroth was once a continent of towering crystal spires, gardens suspended above silver seas, and markets where thousands of voices echoed under bright alien suns. But all of that had turned to memory, scorched from existence in a single rain of glass firebombs that fell like the judgment of silent gods. Now, the ash fields stretched to every horizon, an endless graveyard of jagged black stone and drifting gray dust that never settles. The air is sharp and acrid, alive with ghostly heat that rises from cracks deep in the earth. At night, molten veins glow faintly beneath the surface, like dying embers that refuse to surrender to the cold of oblivion. Ruins, once proud cities, stand twisted and broken. Charred skeletons of towers that lean like they're whispering forgotten secrets to each other. Among them, the wind howls, carrying ash in slow spirals that coat every surface in a soft, deadly shroud. Shadows slip between splintered walls and shattered archways, but they are only tricks of the shifting light, or so the Dominion scouts try to tell themselves. Nothing truly lives here, yet nothing truly dies either. The ground itself seems to remember pain, and the silence feels heavy, like it's holding its breath, waiting for something or someone to break it. And somewhere out there, the half-told stories speak of a lone human sniper, a phantom presence whose bullet might come from nowhere and whose eyes see everything through drifting clouds of ash. Beneath the swirling dust and shattered monuments of a lost civilization, there is only ruin, scorched memory, and the haunting promise that something still moves in the heart of desolation. Unlikely encounter. Among the Dominion's youngest scouts, Vale was eager to prove his worth. A slim, sharp-eyed Soren with scales dulled by drifting soot and a heart hardened by relentless indoctrination. Since hatchling age, he'd been taught that humans were savage, stubborn creatures, relics of old wars who refused to kneel before the order of the Dominion. Yet in quiet moments, doubt sometimes pricked at him, doubt he'd never dare confess aloud. Orders brought him deep into the ash fields, farther than most dared to tread. Rumors had swirled through the barracks and outposts. A lone human sniper haunting the ruins, vanishing before drones could catch a glimpse, leaving only corpses as proof of his existence. Commanders scoffed at such tales, dismissing them as ghost stories told by exhausted sentries. But the Dominion still sent Vale to investigate, to see with his own eyes and silence the whispers. For hours he followed deliberate tracks pressed into the drifting ash, single, measured footprints winding through collapsed archways and blackened courtyards. Each step seemed chosen not to hide, but to invite pursuit, taunting him with a silent dare. The oppressive heat pressed in, and the air tasted of scorched metal and old sorrow. Then, as he rounded a half-fallen pillar carved with ancient Soren script, he saw him. A tall figure, gaunt but unbowed, wrapped in a faded combat cloak that hung like torn shadow. A battered long rifle rested against his shoulder, its barrel dulled by soot and scarred by old battles. One eye was hidden behind a cracked optic scope fused to a simple headband, the other cold and piercing, a pale blue spark that seemed almost to burn through drifting ash. The sniper didn't flinch. He didn't level his weapon. He only turned his gaze to Vale, measuring him with calm certainty, as if he had known every step Vale would take to arrive here. The silence between them stretched thin, heavy with unspoken threat, and something stranger still, weary recognition, like a wolf acknowledging the approach of another hunter. Vale's fingers tightened around the grip of his plasma lance, the Dominion's lessons roaring in his mind. Human, enemy, kill. But for the first time, the certainty faltered, swallowed by the haunted quiet of the ruins and the unshakable calm of the figure before him. Deadly skill revealed. Ash curled around them, carried on winds that whispered through broken walls and half-buried archways. Vale's breath rasped behind his mask as he strained to steady his lance, eyes locked on the sniper's silhouette. But the human raised a hand, silent, deliberate, and turned his gaze toward the horizon where the ash clouds thickened into darker shapes. From that swirling haze, figures emerged, feral raiders wrapped in scorched leathers and rusted armor, faces hidden behind scraps of visor and cloth. They moved like carrion crows drawn to the scent of blood, weapons patched together from scrap and bone, their laughter muffled but unmistakable beneath the growl of the wind. Vale felt the instinct to act, to charge, to fight, to prove his training true. But the sniper's hand, still raised, seemed to still the world itself. Then, almost lazily, he dropped to one knee, drawing the rifle across his shoulder in a single, fluid motion. The cracked optic whined faintly as it powered on, reflecting the briefest glint of red light. The first shot was a sharp, echoing crack, louder than Vale had imagined, splitting the silence like a blade. One raider pitched backward, throat burst open in a red plume that quickly dissolved into the drifting ash. Another step, another breath. The sniper exhaled, pressed cheek to stock. Crack! A second raider collapsed, armor punched through with terrifying precision, dead before his scream could fully form. The raiders scattered, shouts rising in panic as they fired wildly into empty ruins, their bolts and rounds striking only ancient stone and drifting dust. The sniper moved again, cloak rippling like torn smoke, shifting position in a practiced rhythm honed by countless hunts. Shot after shot followed, each echo measured and absolute. Bodies fell where they stood, never two in the same place, as if the sniper read the raiders' fear before they even moved. His calm was unnerving, not rage or triumph, but a cold, deliberate necessity, an art mastered beyond the edge of exhaustion. Vale, transfixed, watched the rifle buck against the sniper's shoulder, each spent casing falling into the ash, each breath controlled, every movement born of years surviving on instinct and grim resolve. Where the Dominion had taught discipline, the human sniper had become discipline itself. Every shot the final word in an argument that tolerated no reply. Alien's crisis of belief. For as long as Vale could remember, the Dominion had shaped every thought like clay. Humans were unpredictable, savage, unworthy of trust, an old enemy who had refused the gift of submission. Every lesson, every rally, every whispered warning had reinforced that truth until it felt like part of his bones. Yet standing in the hushed ruin, ash swirling around scorched statues and broken towers, that certainty wavered. The sniper had not struck him down when he could have. He had not gloated over the raiders' deaths. Instead, he had spoken of duty in a voice heavy with quiet resignation, not hatred. Vale felt the fissures spread across his beliefs, hairline cracks becoming fault lines. He looked at the sniper's rifle, patched and scarred, not adorned with trophies, but worn smooth by necessity. There was no triumph in those cold blue eyes, only the weight of what must be done. The doctrines that had once felt so absolute now rang hollow beside this silent, stubborn humanity. The sniper was not the feral beast from Dominion propaganda, nor the mindless brute Vale had prepared himself to despise. He was something older and sadder, a lone figure carrying a burden no one else dared to lift. The ash fields felt different then, not just a graveyard of stone and bone, but a monument to choices that defied banners and commands. In the sniper's calm resolve, Vale glimpsed a truth too complex for any anthem to capture, that sometimes to stand alone against the darkness was not madness or rebellion, but an act of quiet, desperate grace. Haunting departure, and lingering warning. The silence after the last shot settled heavy and absolute, broken only by the soft hiss of ash shifting underfoot. The sniper regarded Vale with that same weary, unblinking gaze, an ancient calm that seemed to see through scales and training alike. "You've seen enough," he rasped, his voice as rough and wind-burned as the stones around them. "Go back. Tell them the ash fields hold nothing but dust, or tell them nothing at all." Vale opened his mouth to speak, but the words died on his tongue under the weight of the sniper's gaze. The human's cloak stirred in the restless wind, ash clinging to its tattered edges like stubborn memories. "If you come again," the sniper murmured, his hand resting lightly on the battered rifle, "you won't see me before you die. Pray the stars you never do." Then, without drama or haste, he turned and stepped into the labyrinth of broken walls and scorched pillars, his silhouette dissolving into drifting gray until even the faint outline of his rifle vanished. The ruins swallowed him whole, leaving only the empty hush of stone and ash in his wake. Vale stood rooted, breath catching in the filter of his mask, heart hammering against the armor on his chest. In that fading moment, it struck him that what haunted most was not the sniper's threat of death, but the glimpse of something deeper, a lone figure forged by ruin and duty, bound to a purpose no enemy could erase. The ashes whispered around Vale's boots, swirling in slow eddies that seemed to trace the human's path, etching a memory into stone and dust that neither dominion, decree, nor time itself could easily bury. Vale returned to the Dominion outpost with the ash still clinging to his scales and the sniper's words echoing in the quiet corners of his mind. His report was careful, stripped of the raw truth. No mention of the raiders, no confession of what he had truly seen. Officially, the ash fields remained what the Dominion wished them to be: dead, silent, harmless. Yet something within Vale had changed, fissures spreading through convictions once thought unbreakable. The image of that lone human, gaunt, resolute, eyes cold with resolve rather than hatred, refused to fade. It haunted his nights, rose unbidden in moments of doubt, and whispered of a war older and deeper than banners or borders. In the Dominion's marble halls, surrounded by polished armor and righteous chants, Vale caught himself wondering what horrors still lurked in those ruins, held back by a single weary sentinel who asked nothing but to be left alone. He wondered if true strength lay not in the armies that marched or the flags that waved, but in the solitary choice to stand when no one else would. The ash fields remained beyond the edges of most maps, dismissed by command and forgotten by most. But in quiet moments, when the winds hissed through the barracks and the stars burned cold overhead, Vale remembered the blue eye that had measured him without malice or fear. And though he prayed never to cross that path again, he also carried an unsettling hope that somewhere beyond the ruin and drifting ash, that lone sniper still watched, still endured, and still guarded the darkness so others wouldn't have to.